I'm going to give you a brief overview of where I am, the apple industry in Western New York. There are three main commercial areas in New York State. I'm located here in Western New York in the Lake Ontario fruit region. There's two other regions in the state, the Champlain Valley in the northeast and the Hudson Valley in the southeast. Where I am in Western New York is about 2/3 of the commercial apple production in the state. And my region runs from Niagara County, north of Niagara Falls, north of Buffalo in the west, all the way to Oswego County in the east. That is about 240 kilometers long. And most of the apple production is located within as close as a half a kilometer up till about 15 kilometers from the lake. So really tight in there. On the Champlain Valley in the northeast is a colder growing region than we are. It's located east of the Adirondack Mountains. Lake Champlain is here in the state of Vermont, is to the east. And then the Hudson Valley is a warmer growing area generally than we are. And they are located, most of the territory is within 100 miles of New York City. Both Western New York and Champlain Valley market most of their apples wholesale, and the Hudson Valley does wholesale and a lot of direct marketing because the availability of over 10 million people in New York City. We do a survey every 5 years. The last survey from 2017 revealed we have about 20,000 hectares of apples. We're about 60% fresh production, 40% processing. Fresh is on the rise. As little as about 15 years ago when I started, we were more like 50-50. So growers are planting more fresh, high-value varieties. They're intensively managed, modern high-density plantings with modern packing houses and storage operations. Our major apple varieties, we did a survey a few years ago because those are something that we normally don't report on. So I'm just going to name the top 5 apple varieties in acreage now, and the 5 that are being planted in the next few years, and then ones that are being pulled out. The top 5 acreage-wise are McIntosh, Gala, Honeycrisp, Empire, and Fuji. Trends in the next few years, a whole lot of high-value varieties and club varieties. Honeycrisp is number 1. New York 1 or Snapdragon, one of our New York club varieties. Gala, Evercrisp, another club variety, and Premier Honeycrisp, which is the early Honeycrisp strain. And a whole lot of club varieties that I haven't mentioned. Smitten, I know, comes out of Australia. I think some of us grow it here in New York. Ambrosia, some Pink Lady, and lots of other varieties. It seems like every packing house has a club variety that they're getting their growers to grow and market. A lot of the varieties that originated in New York, like McIntosh and Empire, that we can grow really well, like also Cortland and Jonah Mac and Ginger Gold and McCowan, they're being pulled out just because the prices and the demand are so low on those varieties. So a little bit of an overview there. So what I'm going to talk about briefly, descriptions of these pre-harvest PGRs and their uses in New York and beyond, kind of overall effects and things to be aware of. General disorders that have higher incidence by slowing maturation. General disorders that can have a low incidence by delaying maturation. I'm going to share some of those disorder slides from Dr. Chris Watkins, as well as a study that he recently did on stem end flesh browning and Gala. A lot of folks might know Chris Watkins. He's originally from New Zealand, and I work closely with him, a post-harvest physiologist there. And then I'll wrap it up with conclusions. So use of pre-harvest PGRs in New York and beyond, retained that long chemical name, we abbreviated ABG. It works by inhibiting ethylene production. Harvista, the pre-harvest sprayable form of 1-methylcyclopropene or 1-MCP, it actually binds with the ethylene receptors. In New York, Retain's been around about over 20 years. We've used it lots of different ways. Harvista only about 5 years. Both are used in New York, high acreage, for stop drop and varieties that have pre-harvest drop, like McIntosh and Red Delicious. Mainly used for harvest management, can be used for other things too, to reduce rain cracking, reduce water core and things like Fuji and Red Delicious, and allow for sizing and color in drought years, which I will touch on a little bit later. So most focused PGR use is for harvest management, which I hear may be the same in Australia, but you really have to look at post-harvest storability. They're powerful tools to manage harvest, gaining color and size. If you have a lot of one variety, i.e. Gala, I think about us and Australia, they are really good tools, but they certainly are not magic bullets, okay? They slow down maturation progression, but they don't stop every biological process in the apple. All right, the fruit is still ripening internally. Even if you have color development delayed, the fruit is still ripening. Even if starch to sugars conversion is delayed, you still have ripening going on. So those should be thought about. So from a storage perspective, if you harvest your fruit late, they probably don't have really good storage potential. And they have been overused a lot in recent years, and I'll talk about why in Western New York. Some additional kind of notes and generalizations about pre-harvest PGR use. So there's residual effects. Maintaining quality, such as firmness, can be definitely significant. So most varieties, you get a real firmness benefit with these. Storage disorders can go either way. They can be positive, they can be negative, they can be both. Chris Watkins has done a lot of studies, multi-year data. It might increase the incidence of one disorder one year, and the next year it might decrease it, or you might not see significant differences. They can be further ameliorated or increased by post-harvest MCP treatment. So what we call Smart Fresh is used a lot post-harvest. So in concert, if you're using Harvista pre-harvest or Retain pre-harvest or both, and one MCP post-harvest, like a Smart Fresh application, there could also be some problems. I'm going to relate a thing that happened several years ago. So in Western New York, we've had some pretty severe drought periods in 3 of the last 5 years. One of the worst was in 2016. We had a lot of heat, not a lot of rain. Fruit size was small. A lot of growers still don't irrigate here, and things were suffering. As we were getting towards harvest, not only were fruit small, but they weren't sizing up. So, adding Retain and Harvista can buy you time to allow for sizing and color. So growers were crazy about using Retain and Harvista. Some growers probably did 2 full rates of Retain and 1 of Harvista, or 2 of Retain, or 2 of Harvista, or maybe 3 full rate applications of the combinations of those PGRs. I do harvest maturity testing at a large storage facility in Wayne County, and I see the apples. While I'm testing apples, I see the apples coming into QC and then going on to storage. I know the date that they should start be picking Gala, and the Gala weren't coming in, and growers were waiting because color and size weren't ideal. And meanwhile, the calendar is moving, and these fruit are progressing. A QC person related to me that on a Friday, they tested a lot of fruit, a sample of fruit that had a starch pattern index of about 3 or 4, which on a Cornell scale of 1 to 8 is still good for all other things being equal, a good candidate for long-term CA storage. 3 days later, those same fruit from the same block were starching at a 6, meaning they went over the hill just that quickly. And I wasn't surprised because it was like the second week of October, and those fruit should have been harvested weeks ago, even with all the PGRs. What I've noticed in the drought years is, one thing that the pre-harvest PGRs do well is keep fruit on the tree if they're drought susceptible, like Red Delicious and McIntosh and sometimes Honeycrisp. But what they don't do is really show too much of a difference in maturity. I measure internal ethylene and other factors. It's hard to find a difference in drought years. When the trees are stressed, they're not going to respond really well to these plant growth regulators. And I realize growers use it because they don't have a choice, and they want to buy some more time to get size and color. We've had fruit that come in and they want to go into storage because the firmness is like 17 pounds, which is really good for Gala. But if you looked at the background color of these fruit, they're like bright orange, okay? And like I said, they'd be starching at a 6 or a 7, indicating that they're over the hill to have any legs for storage. So these are the type of things that you can run in if you rely on these PGRs too much, especially in conditions that cause stress on trees. Some disorders that have a higher incidence because by slowing fruit maturation, we see a lot of bitter pit. I know you don't grow much Honeycrisp, but it's our biggest problem in Honeycrisp. So if you have other varieties that are very susceptible to bitter pit, pre-harvest PGRs are going to increase the incidence of those, most likely. Also, any type of carbon dioxide injury, whether it be internal or external. Any PGR that delays the maturation can maintain firmness, but it can enhance these things, these carbon dioxide injuries. If you use DPA, diphenylaniline, anti-scald treatment, it's also highly effective at preventing CO2 injuries, and you don't have to worry. But if restrictions allow you not to use DPA, then you're going to have to change your storage management. You could have big potential losses. Ultra low oxygen or dynamic controlled atmosphere can help in situations like this. Disorders that have lowered incidence by delaying maturation. You'll be happy to hear stem end flesh browning, which is a big problem we've seen in Gala for us and probably others around the world. Superficial scald. Both these things will be decreased by PGR use overall. So, quick study. Dr. Watkins at Cornell, he presented on this at our winter conference a couple of months ago. I think these fruit were from the 2019 season. He used a full fruit strain of Gala, which is an early strain that's not a lot grown anymore. It seems more susceptible to stem end flesh browning, which is why Dr. Watkins likes it for his studies. 2 harvests, about a week apart, an early harvest and a late harvest. Harvesta at our labeled rate, which is equivalent to what's there on the slide, and that was applied about 12 and 19 days before harvest. Also, 2 rates of retain, a 1/3 rate, 2/3 rate, so 1/3 of a pouch or 2/3 of a pouch. Those are the rates there converted to hectares. Storage for about 6 months in CA, and then again, plus or minus 1 MCP to Smart Fresh post-harvest. 2 oxygen levels in CA, 0.5%, 2% oxygen, and 0.5 degrees Celsius storage temperature. And the evaluations are done after 7 days at room temperature to kind of simulate going through the market chain. And here's some quick results. So you can see we had pretty high incidence of internal flesh browning in our controls, 26, 28%. No difference really between MCP. It didn't enhance or there was no difference with or without MCP. But both rates of retain and Harvesta significantly decreased stem end flesh browning in Gala. So that's good news. And we've seen that pretty consistently. Just a quick note, I was asked to give this talk based on some work I did on PGRs in 2017 to 2019. They're not storage trials, which is why I'm not discussing here, but here's the setup using a motorized mist blower. And I was looking at different rates and timings of retain and Harvesta on Honeycrisp, Gala, and Fuji to see in how far we could go, how late into harvest and still have decent fruit quality. And, harvest week 3, the first week being the week that our controls are ready for harvest. By the 3rd week, there was still some fruit that was edible, but it certainly didn't have any storage legs in most years. Conclusions, okay, what you do in the field really impacts the storability of the fruit, and that includes these pre-harvest PGRs like Retain and Harvesta. You're usually going to get positive effects on firmness, not always. This is the thing that I want to stress. Each variety, each timing, each PGR, each rate, harvest timing, plus or minus MCP, atmospheres for CA, storage temperatures, storage length should be evaluated, okay? All of those things need to be looked at over multiple years and treated differently because we've noticed every variety acts differently. Even some of these new varieties with parentage of it's hard to predict how they're going to, you really need to do storage trials. And I know you have post-harvest folks that can do those storage trials. We know less about these impacts, less than ideal. We're aware of the enhanced risk of bitter pit and CO2 injury and Honeycrisp. I know something you guys don't grow too much. Our preference, and by our, I mean, this is Chris's statement, but I agree with it 100%, is to use PGRs to get better storage quality at a normal or earlier harvest than to extend the harvest season and to harvest late and expect to have good storage quality in this fruit. It's easy to say as a post-harvest person or an extension person. If you're a field guy and you're behind on harvest, I completely understand.